Mr. Miller, I missed you.
So now we're not ready. Alright, good. No, that was my bell, right? You had all lunch to get that stuff done, and you had a morning bell.
Come on. Can we get class to come back? We just finished, Mr. Beller. The scrapbook is ready. Hey, I don't know if you're talking about
Be ready.
brother, they need to bring back the you already yelling at me.
Hey, Bill. Look, I don't even wear a belt anymore because I don't want to be tempted to use it.
I'll sign pictures.
Brian, you beat him and D-Shine?
Oh my gosh.
Alright.
I'm trying to tell you.
Yes, ma'am. Alright, hold on to that for a second. Alright, can we go? Can we?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Caitlin, you ready to? Desiree, same thing. Alright. So just to recap a couple things here. We talked about how with 1866, Congress has control of Reconstruction, right? They're going to, we call it radical Reconstruction, right? And what is radical about it, you know? Well, you're placing the military in control of these areas, right? To try to ensure that some of these changes that you're doing, especially as far as the status goes for African Americans. I think that's pretty extreme given like what the status quo was, right? It's a pretty radical change. I was talking about this with my first block class. And you talk about like, you know, all right, so white Southerners, are they compliant? Are they accommodating to these changes? Are they resistant? And I think that, you know, it's easy to talk about it being resistant, right? Pretty obvious that they're being resistant. Some of these sources that you looked at, you know, and we're talking about the 8 out of 11 here in a second, that there's some resistance. But like racism is a taught thing, right? It's not something that comes naturally. Like, you're taught, all right, racism. And so I was trying to put myself in like shoes, like, all right, so if I like you think about any sort of prejudice or bias that you might have, and it doesn't have to be something serious as far as like people and ethnicities or but like just like ice cream, right, or something. And then you're like, all right, I like, you know, Rocky Road ice cream or something like that. And like, and all of a sudden I've been told that, you know, I can't have this anymore, right? And instead I have to have mint chocolate chip ice cream, you know? And like, so how long would it take me? And I know this is kind of like a weaker example, but how long would it take me before I accepted the fact that Rocky Road ice cream is no longer going to be served and I can't have that, and instead I'm going to be forced to have mint chocolate chip? Like, what's an acceptable time period of like before I accept the fact that this is the way things are? And so I look at that and like, you know, kind of like in terms of Reconstruction, if you're the South, and for, you know, for a long time the social pyramid has been slaves, right, white Southerners, plantation owners, right, and all of a sudden this is starting to get changed around a little bit, and especially when the military's in there, it kind of forces. So what's an acceptable time period? Like when we're judging Reconstruction as historians, right, as people being in the 21st century, when should we see the South turn the corner, right? Is it the fact that, or is you personally, do you say that the South should have turned the corner as soon as the war was lost? They should have started the period of acceptance, right? I don't know. That's something I'm still struggling with. Like, you don't want to think of things like through the eyes of the 21st century all the time. You don't want to judge people all the time by your standards, all right? So, but you have to think, right? So, when would I feel like it's acceptable for like these changes, right? Not only to be implemented, all right, but supported, all right, and supported by Southern governments. I don't have a date or a year yet, but that's something that's been kind of in my head. Olivia.
Well, like when you say that it would be like the generation, like you can't really teach a generation who grew up that way.
Yeah.
Like.
So it'd be the next generation, like the kids.
Be like the generation after that would like be like the people that would like completely accept it. Like.
Yeah. And so in that case, that's interesting that you mentioned that, right? Because then we could probably say, okay, by the end of the 20th century, right? Or sorry, excuse me, by the end of the 19th century, the 1890s, you know, the Civil War ends in 1865. If we say by 1895, right, there's people that were born at the end of the Civil War are now 30 years old, right? So maybe we should see some changes then, right? Maybe that's how we can judge, all right, whether or not, you know, we talk about accommodating or resisting. Well, then if you look at lynching, all right, during the 1890s, they're actually going up, right? And then we see Jim Crow. Jim Crow laws and these discriminatory laws. They actually didn't. They didn't exist in the 1880s. It wasn't until like in the 1890s that you started to see these Jim Crow laws come up, right? And so then you can point to that, right? So this is a sign or example of the South not changing, you know. Yeah, that's interesting. You like that, you know. This generation, and then we can say, all right. Now, this generation, you've lived during Reconstruction, you've lived during these changes. This is all you know, right? So if you still don't accept them, what's the problem? Why not? If you look in this period, before we get to why Reconstruction ends, the reason why, and I love doing this with my APUSH kids, if we had more time, we could do it to an extent. I think this and then Native Americans. If you look at history that was written about Native Americans from like the 1920s or something like that, all right, a U.S. history textbook there. You know, Native Americans are, you know, the terms that historians use or how they describe Native American groups. They describe Native American groups as just Native Americans, right? And it's just not isolated by Iroquois or Powhatan or Pueblo, right? It's just Native Americans as one group. And then you start to see how historians have changed. They're looking at the same stuff, right? The history hasn't changed, but how they interpret the history has. I think Reconstruction would be like number 2 on the list as far as how history has treated this time period differently. If you read books on Reconstruction and why Reconstruction failed at the end of the 19th century into the 20th century, right? It's wildly different than if you read about Reconstruction now, right? These things, history hasn't changed. We don't have time travel, right? So these events still happen. But it's just interesting to see how historians look at the same events, right? But come to different conclusions and come to different interpretations, right? And then you have to start thinking about why. Is not my door being hot? Or is that I'm just hearing things? All right, you have to think about why. What influences these people to look at the same facts, right? But present it in different ways or come up with different interpretations. Reconstruction is just a perfect example of that, all right? How people saw Reconstruction at the end of the 19th century to the end of the 20th century. Completely different. KKK, Black Codes, sharecropping, tenant farming. Oh, yeah. All right. This one. The Supreme Court.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be a failure. All right? Or this is an example of the failure of Reconstruction. The Supreme Court, you have two years that are important to the Supreme Court cases here dealing with Reconstruction issues. 1873 and 1876. All right? All right. These 2 years, the Supreme Court, they hear some cases here. And these cases deal with the 14th Amendment and they deal with the 15th Amendment. So the Supreme Court are making rulings based that are going to determine civil rights, right? And are going to determine voting rights, right? And pretty much for African Americans. Well, the Supreme Court in 1873, they hear a court case that's called the Slaughterhouse cases. And they hear a court case that are dealing with the 14th Amendment and civil rights. And they determine that civil rights are not federal rights, but civil rights are rights granted to you by states. And if that's the case, then really the federal government doesn't have the power to grant people certain rights. Those powers are left up to individual states. With that Supreme Court case decision, you just pretty much do this to the 14th Amendment. And you wipe away a lot of the power that the 14th Amendment had as far as guaranteeing equal protection under the law for all people, for all citizens. Now it's up to individual states. 3 years later, the Supreme Court case, Supreme Court listens to another court case, and they look at the 15th Amendment, the voting rights. And they say that the 15th Amendment doesn't ensure voting rights for everyone. The 15th Amendment just makes sure that it protects from certain forms of discrimination dealing with voting. Oh, okay. So if that's the case, if this 15th Amendment doesn't ensure, right, and guarantee voting rights, it just protects you from certain forms of discrimination, oh, okay, so that means we can have literacy tests, right? And that way we can give these people like, oh, this happens to be, maybe Republicans or poor whites or African Americans. We'll give them like the copy of the Constitution, of the Mississippi State Constitution. We'll ask them to read it and analyze it, right? Okay. Or how about this? Maybe we'll do a poll tax, and if you can't pay the tax, you can't vote. Or we'll do this. We'll call this the grandfather clause, right? If your grandfather wasn't able to vote before January 1st, 1863, then neither can you. How did we come up with that date? Oh, it's just random. Oh, wait a minute. You mean January 1st, 1863 is the day that the Emancipation was issued and was put into effect? Oh, that's a strange coincidence. Oh, your grandfather was a slave before? Oh, okay. Well, unfortunately for you, you can't vote. And so that's what you start to see happening here, right? The 14th Amendment, the federal government kind of is pushed away and it's left up to the states. Now, the 15th Amendment, it allows those loopholes. Literacy tests start to happen, all right? Poll taxes start to happen, and grandfather clauses start to be put into effect. You're disenfranchising a large group of people, especially in the South. You have to think, where are the majority of African Americans living here until the World War I, until World War II? They live in the South, right? And if you go there in the 1960s and you're looking at these voting districts, right? This is 100 years after the Civil War ends, right? How many African Americans living in this district in Mississippi or in Alabama are actually registered to vote? You're looking at like 90% of them are not registered to vote. Why? Because of some of these laws that were put into place. Now, that's once again the Voting Rights Act of '65, take away literacy tests, right? The 24th Amendment, all right, outlaws the poll tax, all right? So you start to see things happen here, but it takes a long time, all right? It takes a long time. So why does Reconstruction fail then? Why does it end? I shouldn't say fail. Why does it end? Well, a couple of reasons here. Number one, we talked about Ulysses S. Grant. Ulysses S. Grant, great guy, nice guy, good general. He has a little bit of a drinking problem. He's gonna die of throat cancer because he smokes cigars too much. So yeah. So all you guys out there, all right, smoking, dies of throat cancer. But Grant's a. Grant's
I was
a.
looking at Mela for a second, and I was like,
Oh,
I
no.
thought he was too. Who was he looking at? Angela in the computer.
The computer.
All right.
Oh,
Anyway,
I was-
all right, we good?
I was like, what?
So Ulysses S. Grant, he's a Republican, right? And he wins in '68 and he wins in '72. So he's going to serve 2 terms. But he's a military person. He's not a politician, and so his friends. There's a couple big scandals during his administration that people start to lose faith in the Republicans, right? As far as their ability to lead. One, we're trying to build this transcontinental railroad. It's going to actually be completed in 1869. What's happening here is the federal government, is giving away contracts to companies to help build the transcontinental railroad. Well, one of Grant's people, and it actually goes all the way up to the vice president, they start this company. It's called the Credit Mobilier Company. It's a fake railroad company. So they get a government contract. The government gives them money to build this railroad, and instead of building the railroad, they just pocket the money. All right? That's one scandal. The other scandal is called the whiskey ring scandal. And this is when, you still have a tax on whiskey, and this goes all the way up to Grant's private secretary. Instead of collecting the tax on whiskey, what people are doing is these tax collectors are just taking bribes. You don't have to pay the tax on whiskey, just pay me some money, all right, and I'll say that you pay the tax. And so these scandals are breaking out, and people are not only losing faith in the government, but they're losing faith in Ulysses Grant and the Republicans as well. Unfortunately as well, for the Republican Party, is you have the Panic of 1873. Right? A panic is a depression. Panic of 1873, unfortunately for anybody that's in office, whenever the economy takes a hit and goes down, people blame the people that are in office, right? And it's going to be hard getting reelected when the economy is at an all-time low, right? In 73, we hit a panic. People are losing their jobs. Banks are failing. Businesses are going out of business. Once again, who are you blaming? You're blaming the members of Congress. You're blaming the federal government, right? And these are Republicans. The last reason, the 1876 election. I would star this. I would underline it. I would highlight this, right? And I would put out to the side here the Compromise of 1877. And I would star that. I would highlight that. I would underline that. 1876 election and the Compromise of 1877. And then we're done. All we have to do is take a quiz after this. All right. So now we come back to that little number there, 8 out of 11, right?
Uh-huh.
By 1875, all right, by 1875, 8 out of the 11 Confederate states, right, have gone back into the Union. They met all the requirements that that Congress had put up for them, and they're back. Now, what's happened, though, is in those 8 states, right, it's not Republicans that are in office, but it's the Democrats, right? And these are known as redeemers, right, because they're going to redeem the South. All right, but these Democrats, right? Those are the conservatives. Those are the former slave owners. These are the people that are disenfranchised in African Americans. And in 8 out of 11 states, they're back in power. All right, so we have that going on, right? Now the 1876 election happens, and you have Rutherford B. Hayes, Republican, and Samuel Tilden, all right, Democrat. It comes down to these disputed electoral votes, and ironically enough, they're in Florida, all right? Florida has some disputed electoral votes, right? Just like in the 2000 election. Well, instead of doing a recount and everything, the Congress, in their infinite wisdom, they decide, hey, why don't we come up with a special commission, right? We'll get a group of people together, about 10 people, right? And we'll decide and hammer out something to do with these Florida votes. And what they do is they end up deciding this agreement. It's called the Compromise of 1877. And this Compromise of 1877 says this, all right? The Republicans, you can win the presidency, all right? Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican, will win the presidency. In exchange for the presidency, the Republicans have to agree to withdraw the federal troops from the remaining 3 states, all right? End in Reconstruction, right? And that's what happens, right? Compromise of 1877, the Republicans win the presidency, and in return, they agree to remove the last of the troops from the 3 states. What's that going to leave it open to, right? Those Democrats, right, coming into office. The South is going to be known as the Solid South, right? You might hear things called yellow dog Democrats during this time period. Yellow dog Democrats are people that are Southerners, right? And you can put a yellow dog on the ballot, and they're going to vote for it if it's a Democrat, right? And a lot of these smaller districts, you know, the Democrats run unopposed, and for the next until the 1930s, right? The South is going to be solidly behind the Democratic Party. African Americans solidly behind the Republican Party. It's in the 1930s that you start to see that switch. And for the 1932 election will be the first time African Americans would start to vote for Democrats. And by 1968, you'll see the switch. All right, and the South will be solidly behind the Republican Party, and African Americans will be solidly behind the Democratic Party. All right, because the two parties kind of switch as far as being liberal and being conservative. Why? Well, it starts with FDR and the New Deal, right? And so the Depression's happening. He has these programs, and these programs, ironically enough, don't really help out African Americans. But you start to see, because the South is impoverished, right? It helps out them, so he keeps that Southern vote. And then because of some of these programs that are meant to target African Americans, and some of these people like Mayor McLeod Bethune, who is an African American, he's placed in FDR's cabinet. And because of some of the works of Eleanor Roosevelt, you start to see this shift happening. Now in '68, this is when it completes itself. So what happens by '68? Well, we have the Civil Rights Movement, right? And in '65, when Lyndon B. Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act, he says that we've just given the Republican Party the South for the next foreseeable future. He knows that he's going to lose the South for the Democratic Party, but he does it anyway. He signs it. In '68, and this is not like a conspiracy or anything, but '68, Richard Nixon's campaign manager gives an interview in the New York Times, and he talks about his strategy. It's called the Southern Strategy. And the Southern Strategy is this, that Richard Nixon is going to, and he's going to run on this platform of kind of really harping on and exposing the anger, all right, that Southerners have to all this change that's happening during the Civil Rights Movement. And he's essentially saying, you don't want the federal government forcing busing. You don't want the federal government, doing all this stuff with immigration and stuff. Well, guess what? If you vote for us, right, we're going to stay out of it. And we're going to let the states handle it. And so once again, so that's kind of like the no more big federal government, state government, right? Kind of like the platform of the Republican Party today, right? It's out there, right? It's out there. And that's going to encourage people to start voting for that. Right, voting for the Republicans. Nixon wins a good amount, right? And now, you have President Obama, he won North Carolina and Virginia. I think Clinton won Virginia this year. She might have. right? But besides that, we really don't see. I think when Obama won North Carolina in 2008, that was the first time a Democrat had won since Jimmy Carter in '76, right? So, that kind of shows you like how strong this is. And this past election, it wasn't very close. North Carolina used to be seen as kind of up in the air, but not really, right? Not really. Any other questions?
So
Saucer.
the 8 states that like agreed with Congress's plan, so
Yeah.
like the military districts were taken out of this.
Yep. The military districts were taken out. They were given like their own state borders and stuff. Live representation, all that good stuff. Any other questions or concerns? All right. You can keep your notes out. You just need a half sheet of paper and number 1 through 10.
Yeah, do you get like 4 sheets of paper? Oh, we don't need to split in half.
It's a really interesting time period. Hopefully,
Angelo's ready for the squeeze. We're about to take right now.
yeah, Angela, half sheet of paper.
Turn it into the box when we're done. Thanks. Home slice. Isn't it your job?
This is great. I should have been doing this since the beginning of the year. Just live broadcast my class.
That's a good idea.
Do you think it was actually
It would have been like I never missed class.
You don't go on that. Well, I could see how many people are watching. I can see how many viewers have.
I was watching it.
There's a little bit of a drag. It's about like a 10-second delay.
I gotta watch it twice.
All right. So this was created by Mr. Nolan. All right. So you're gonna see.
It won't be as good.
It won't be as good. Yeah.
Why do you let others do it?
Amen.
We're supposed to work together, Mela. All right. And so as American One history teacher, I'm supposed to work with other people and kind of give up some of my power and accept their help. It's a struggle for me. All right.
I doubt that ever happens.
It's happening right now.
Stop crying.
So okay. How about you doubt that it happens very often? How about that? All right, we good? Stop talking. This is an individual thing, right? Yeah. Okay. Number 1.
Hold up. She's tripping.
Number 1. What is Reconstruction? What was its goal? And you just have to put the letter. Was it A, fixing the North? Was it B, repairing the government?
Oh, I got it.
Was it C, rebuilding the nation after the Civil War? Or was it D, putting the Northern Army back together? What was Reconstruction? What was its goal? Was it A, fixing the North? Was it B, repairing the government? Was it C, rebuilding the nation after the Civil War? Or was it D, putting the Northern Army back together? All right. I will go back to anyone said any questions that you need me to repeat. I'll go back at the end. Okay. This whole period, this whole 12 years that we've been talking about, what was it about? Huh? You're gonna have a bellow problem in a second. Number 2. I told you I'm going back to it. You chose to fill up your water bottle.
I didn't know.
Number 2. What did Lincoln see as the number 1 goal of Reconstruction? Was it A, helping the slaves get their lives together? Was it B, crushing the will of the South, punishing the South? Or was it C, putting the country back together as quickly as possible? Or was it D, fixing the North's economy?
Angry with it.
Wait,
Mr.
do we
Bell,
all
do
have
these-
our notes options?
Yes.
Over today?
Yeah, sure.
These
We went
walls-
over this. You should have this out. You should know this. Yes.
Mr. Bella, do these walls represent the walls in your house? Or like, are they? You have a lot of pictures up in your house too?
Have some. Anna, stop cheating.
I want to. You can picture your house.
Okay.
We should, like, do a live
Number
show
3.
of, like, house tour.
Right.
How did Andrew Johnson differ from Abraham Lincoln?
Ah, this is
Right?
Okay.
A, Andrew Johnson was a radical abolitionist. That means he was all for full equality of freeing the slaves and having free men have the same rights as whites. B, he was a military leader. Andrew Johnson was a military leader before he became president. C, he was openly anti-black.
Oh yeah.
All right, or racist. Brian. All right.
Come
He
on,
had to
Brian.
be anti-talker. All right.
Please.
D, he was really interested in punishing the South. How did Andrew Johnson differ from Abraham Lincoln? A, Johnson was a radical abolitionist. B, Johnson was a military leader before he became president. C, Johnson was openly anti-black. Sydney, all right, thank you. D, he was really interested in punishing the South. All right. Question number 4. What caused Congress to take control of Reconstruction? Congress took control of Reconstruction because they were dissatisfied or not happy with how lenient the president was being towards the South. Congress was took control of Reconstruction because they were unhappy about how little the president had accomplished. Congress took control of Reconstruction because they were unhappy with how little impact they had. It's an ego thing. Congress took control of Reconstruction because they wanted to improve the lives of the white plantation owners after the war. Why did the Republicans in Congress, right, remember that, take control of Reconstruction? They were unhappy with how lenient presidential Reconstruction was. They were unhappy with how little the president had done. They were unhappy with how little they had done. Or they wanted to improve the lives of the white southern plantation owners. They just lost their crops, homes are destroyed, right? We got to help them out. All right, what was radical about radical Reconstruction? I actually said that question almost verbatim today during the lecture. What was radical about radical Reconstruction? Well, radical Reconstruction was a time when hundreds of slaves were killed in the fighting. Radical Reconstruction was radical because the revolutionary policy of the Congress made sweeping changes possible in the South for the first time. Radical Reconstruction was radical because the aggressive laws passed in the South prohibited any gains from the Civil War. Nothing good came from Reconstruction, right? No successes. Or D, radical Reconstruction was radical because the North seized control of the South economically and appointed their own governors to control Southern affairs. Now, if you think about that, they took control of the South economically. You might want to, if we see a lot of factories and industry come down to the South. And I want to think about that. Once again, I'll come back to any that you want me to repeat. Let's try to keep, we have those notes out, right?
Yep.
They're only using a half sheet of paper. You got a whole sheet of paper with your notes. Maybe we cover up some of those answers. Right? Cover them up, maybe just a little bit, right? There you go. All right, what was the purpose of the 14th Amendment? Giving the women the right to vote. No, that's fine. B, protecting the freedoms of speech, press, and the religion. Better late than never, right?
Hey.
C, establishing the citizenship of newly freed men or former slaves. Or D, freeing the slaves. Sydney, if you got a question, you can ask me. You got a comment, keep it to yourself. You got a comment, keep it to yourself.
Stop talking.
Thank you.
Alright, bro. Please stop talking to him.
I am angry today.
Hey, Sydney said you like Papa Smash.
Oh.
Sydney gets a nap.
Yes,
How's that? Number 7. What was the significance of the military occupation of the South by Northern troops? Why is this important, right? It's important because it prevented Southerners from returning to safety after the war. Right? They couldn't go back to their house, their homes, their land. B, allowed the North to bully the South into submission. Bunch of bullies. C, it provided a source of protection for freedmen trying to utilize their newly given rights. D, it demonstrated the lack of trust that Northerners had for Southerners. Right? What would be the best possible answer for why this is important? Tamir.
No.
Oh, you're just cheating. Okay.
Do we answer it out loud?
No, put it on the paper.
Oh.
I didn't do nothing.
Tamir, I don't just choose people to pick on, right? There's always a reason for why I would call out your name. Either I want something from you, or I want you to stop doing something.
So here.
In this case, there's 2. I want your answers. I want you to stop trying to give away answers.
Let's go.
Number 8, the 15th Amendment was motivated partially because getting women to vote for the progressive candidates was going to be a good thing. We talked about women voting a lot. We talked about progressivism a lot in this class. B, the 15th Amendment was at least partially motivated by ensuring the Southern economy was stabilized. Yeah, right. Property values down. Right. We need to get this amendment put in the Constitution so the Southern economy can get back on its feet. 15th Amendment was at least partially motivated by keeping as few people voting as possible. It's one thing that we've done a good job in this country is teaching apathy, all right, and encouraging apathy. Don't try if you think you're going to fail. It's probably one of the reasons why we passed this 15th Amendment. Or B, we passed this 15th Amendment maybe because knowing that black men would vote Republican. I know what you guys are thinking, right? Given the fact that less than half the eligible voters voted in the last presidential election, maybe this is the reason why the 15th Amendment was passed. 60% of the people decided that, you know what? I'd rather complain about things than do something about it. Blake.
Alright, so for D, would that be Republican back then or Republican now since you kind of like switched?
I don't know. You gotta think about it. Number 9. When I'm done? Yes. This is this is why I preface this by Mr. Nolan. The beef between, I believe that beef means some sort of conflict or disagreement, right?
Yep.
The beef between Congress and the president that began back, not then, that began with Lincoln, eventually resulted in Biggie and Pac getting shot. I can only imagine this would be the rappers Notorious B.I.G. and Tupac, right? Shakur, yes. All eyes on me. Right.
Alright, sure.
B, the impeachment of President Johnson. C, the growth of radical Reconstruction. Or D, Lincoln's assassination. All right, the beef were conflicts, all right, between Congress and the president that began with Lincoln, eventually resulted in the music artist Notorious B.I.G. right, and Tupac Shakur getting shot. B, the impeachment of President Johnson. C, the growth of radical Reconstruction. Or D, Lincoln's assassination. Pop, pop!
Okay. Doesn't really sound like that, brother.
I wouldn't know.
You don't shoot gun?
I don't shoot guns.
He had a register.
These are the only weapons I need.
Yeah.
And this, most powerful weapon.
Word. All three of those off.
I'm a rose that grew from the concrete, baby. All right. Number 10. Ultimately.
Yeah.
Love California. Ultimately, radical Reconstruction came to an end as a result of Lincoln's assassination, the ratification of the 15th Amendment, and the growth of the Freedmen's Bureau. Ultimately, radical Reconstruction, and radical Reconstruction, since it happens after presidential Reconstruction, is the end, right? Radical Reconstruction, or Reconstruction, right, came to an end as a result of a rise in violence against blacks, the high cost of maintaining it, and the rise in popularity of Democrats who were against it. C, Godzilla, which is misspelled. Or D, the hatred of pro-education legislation and the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. Why did Reconstruction end? Right? Why did Reconstruction end? Now, Tamir, I think I have to go back to number 1 for you, right? All right. Are there any others that I need to go back to? All right. Number 9 and 6. All right. So 9, 8, 6, 1. Okay, that's the ones I'm going to go back to. 9, 8, 6, 1. Okay.
Then you also go
Yeah. All right. Can we stop talking? Thanks. All right. Number 9. There you are.
There's no extra credit.
No extra credit. Because I allowed you to use your notes.
Yeah, I didn't even need my notes.
Well, then you don't need extra credit. All right. Number 8. There you are. Okay. Number 6. There you are. There you go. Don't think about it.
Wait, no, the one where it was like,
And then number 1. There you go. Come here.
the one where it was like, they didn't move enough, or, you know what I'm talking
Don't know what you're talking about.
You got another video. I am Blue Chicken.
Number
That's
10.
a Gucci gang, nigga.
Number
Yeah, the Gucci gang.
Yeah.
If you're done, put your name on it. Hand it in.
All right, guys. Good luck, everybody.
He's really bad at wording questions.
On the theater.
You made squid. I think it's doing the work.
It's not
We should turn in our.
Maybe we can make it. Yeah. That's how all relationships.
Right in the.
What?
Perfect.
Hey,
You want that party? Do night.
Isabella.
Yeah.
We should turn in right.
Hamburger.
Don't worry.
The last thing, yes.
40. Bring it and we 40.
The last thing, yes. If you have an outline for me, make sure you have that out. If you have an outline for me, make sure you have that out, and so you can turn it into me.
Yeah, can I get a pass to come back to the play?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, let me come back to a place to do my outline.
No.
All right.
Alright, you're gonna turn, bro.
Oh, Desiree.
See what happens.
You got max out. I'm going in, out of that bitch. You got power to it. I can't do it.
Alright, I have some flex passes. I don't think I have a lot, but you can ask your teachers. Thanks a lot. That one that's ripped up a little bit?
Oh, we just do our outlines too.
Yes.
That's me.
I need to.
Let me get that 6 foot from you, ready?
Huh?
6 foot.
Sydney, if you have any questions, look on the blog. If you have any questions, let me know, okay?
Isabella?
No.
He doesn't need these.
I don't need the notes.
I
Alright,
got right on my homework.
on Thursday, right? On Thursday when you come in, you're going to see something that looks similar to this. Alright, so this was from my 1B class. It tells you your groups and where you're going to sit and which unit you have. Alright?
Alright.
And so you're going to sit there, you're going to be assigned a unit. We can go through the requirements for the unit review. Like I said, it's going to take about, if you go by my 3A classes, it's going to take about 45 minutes to an hour to finish it. We're going to present them. I'll hit up on some of the key points that I feel like are important. We'll start reviewing for the Kahoot, right? And we'll move on from there. I don't care what your teachers have told you about, review days and stuff. No, you're going to be here because it's a regular day and because it's 20% of your final grade. Alright, the exam is 20% of your final grade. Why would you be lazy and not show up?
Bella, it's been real. It's been having a nice year with you.
I'll see you on Thursday. No, I'll see you on Thursday.
I'll see you like next year, I guess.
Where do we get a pass?
Blake, it has been nice.
Hey, Isabella, can I
You've always been cool, bro. Let's go shoot sometime.
I'm not very good at it.
I'll teach you the ways.
Honestly, bro, I'm scared to shoot.
My dad's bought a new Glock. We'll go shoot it.
Is your Nike sign supposed to be upside
I got three.
No.
I got 3 passes.
3 guns.
That's
funny.
I got 4.
Brother, do you want to
I got 2 guns right here. That's all I got.
Mr. Beller, Mr. Beller,
Like, what are you gonna do if someone breaks into your house?
Mr. Beller,
Take what you want.
Mr. Beller,
You're stupid, bro. I'm blowing a hole in their head.
Mr. Beller.
I'm saying.
Oh.
You want something, you're going to break into my house.
How are you?
Oh, my life? My life?
Okay.
I just have to show this.
I'll feel this either way. Why do you make the S so ugly?
It would be fun to
Whose is this?
Brother, that Ryan bring out my grade and I believe.
That's mine.
It's mine.
Do you need it?
Also, I got
Does it look like I need it?
It's the 2
Does it look like I
I'll
need
go over Anchor.
Yes.
Anchor.
Do I need it?
I've got
Ha!
lots of things. Just slide on his
Ha!
And then,
Come on back.